What's up, Falcons Nation? It's your boy Jew coming at you guys with another edition of What's the Word Dirty Bird. It is Wednesday night. We do this usually every Wednesday during the off season at 8 p.m. Eastern time. But now we will be doing What's the Word every other Wednesday because we're ramping up for the season. And we started back doing our heavy hitter shows every other Wednesday night. So the season is almost upon us, but I hope you guys so far are having a great week. So far, it is Hump Day. But tonight we're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons pass rush and why the Atlanta Falcons have struggled with pass rush. And of course, we're going to do some fan Q&A as well as we always do on What's the Word Wednesdays. But I am going to jump in the chat and say what's up to a couple of you guys that's already in the chat. Definitely hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I believe I'm one subscriber away from 1,800. So at some point this evening, if somebody subscribes, if they can let me know in the chat that they recently subscribed and let me know that I hit that 1,800 mark. But we are almost just 200 away from 2,000 subscribers. So I appreciate each and every one of you guys for your continued support and helping me reach another milestone. But with that being said, we're going to hop in the chat, say what's up to my boy Noah Tyndale, a.k.a. the professor, a.k.a. the head coaches in the building. So what's up, man? I appreciate you joining me tonight. Joseph Thornton, what's going on, man? I thank you for always supporting the channel as well. I hope you guys so far are enjoying your Wednesday night. And like I said, go ahead and share out this content. Go ahead and share out or hit that likes button and that subscribe button for your boy. But we are going to go ahead and jump into the first topic of the night, which is the main topic of the night, which is why the Atlanta Falcons have struggled with pass rush. So this whole category or this topic came about from Monday night. If you guys were watching Cooler Talk with me, K Styles, and Mad Mike, we were talking about free agency. And Dante Fowler Jr.'s name came up in the chat. You guys know that I was a huge Dante Fowler Jr. fan when he was here in Atlanta. Now he's no longer in Atlanta Falcons. He's now a Dallas Cowboy because he was let go in the offseason. The Falcons decided to release him. So with that being said, it actually sparked my interest to want to talk about the Atlanta Falcons pass rush. You guys know that I'm huge on talking about the trenches for our Atlanta Falcons because I believe the game is won and lost in the trenches. Football is a game of inches. It's a game about moving another man against his will. And you guys know that Dante Fowler Jr. was one of those guys that we signed to be like a big name pass rusher to come in and be one of the key guys for our Atlanta Falcons team. And during our last show, I kind of mentioned that Dante Fowler Jr. didn't live up to his contract when he was here in Atlanta. And I had one of the fans in the in the chat kind of say, Jew, Dante Fowler was your guy. And like, don't turn your back on him now, which I didn't turn my back on Dante Fowler Jr. But I thought it was some really interesting research that I went and did. I actually went and looked up the numbers for Vic Beasley, and I went and looked up the numbers for Dante Fowler Jr. And I believe Vic Beasley actually have more career sacks in his career than Dante Fowler Jr. A lot of people wanted Vic Beasley gone when he was here in Atlanta after we drafted him. I believe we drafted him in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And we know, I think it was 2015, excuse me. And then 2016 is when he had his breakout year when we went to the Super Bowl. And he actually ended up having 15 and a half sacks. And he led the league in sacks that one season. He made the Pro Bowl and he made All Pro. But I say all of this just to say, as I was stating, everybody called Vic Beasley a bust. Me, Mad Mike, K Styles, we kind of had Vic Beasley's back. I was one of those guys, if you go back on my channel, that I wanted the Falcons to actually keep Vic Beasley when we had him back in those times. At first, I think when Vic Beasley actually was on the team, I wasn't doing YouTube yet, but I know Mad Mike was one of those guys on his channel that was a big Vic Beasley supporter, and I was a Vic Beasley supporter and thought that the Falcons should re-sign Vic Beasley when we had him here. But like I said, I say all of this to say, Vic Beasley, when I looked up his career sack numbers, he had 37 and a half sacks in his career. And Dante Fowler Jr. officially has 35 sacks in his career since he's been in the league. Mind you, Vic Beasley didn't play in the league last year. Vic Beasley right now is outside of the NFL. He's no longer in the NFL, and he didn't play for an NFL roster last year. So that's minus 1 year. Vic Beasley, without playing a full year last year, still has more sacks than a guy like Dante Fowler Jr. Now, I say that not to take shots at Dante Fowler Jr. because Dante Fowler Jr. is still my dog. I used to call when he was here, I said that's my dog. He's one of my favorite, was one of my favorite Atlanta Falcons players and one of my favorite pass rushers that was on our team. But what it goes to show to me is one of the main reasons why the Atlanta Falcons struggled with pass rush the last couple seasons is we signed players that had one good season instead of being an organization where we look at players' career body of work. We've been a team where if a player has one splash year, we're willing to go out and take a risk and sign that player to a big contract. And I think that that's one of the main reasons why the Falcons have struggled. And I feel like it ties right into what we were talking about on Monday night with talking about going out and paying guys in free agency, how that can be dangerous and how it can be tricky. And I talked about Monday night that Terry Fontenot, who is our GM, he believes in you rewarding the players that are on your roster before you go out and sign players outside of your team and players that are not currently on your roster, because you know what your players can actually do. And I feel like that was one of the big things that hurt our Falcons team when Thomas Dimitroff was here. He went out and signed guys to try to, appease the front office, try to save his job. He went out and kind of reached and grabbed players instead of paying some of the guys that we had, like a Vic Beasley. I feel like the Falcons at that time probably would have been better off just going ahead and signing Vic Beasley. Everybody was on Vic Beasley's neck after he had that great season in 2016, which I say was probably the downfall of Vic Beasley's career, him leading the league in sacks. I feel like that put unnecessary pressure on him by the Falcons fans and by NFL fans, because they assumed that Vic Beasley was a generational talent at that point. They figured that he was going to be like a top 10 pass rusher in the league because he had that one splash season. But this is one of the reasons why Mad Mike, and K-Styles, we always talk about consistency. That's something that we always preach, not only when we do our heavy hitter shows, but that's something that I preach here on my channel, is you want to go out and get players that have been consistent. Matt Ryan was one of those guys where we talked about who's been consistent throughout his career. If you go back to when the Falcons signed John Abraham from the New York Jets at the time, he was one of those players that was consistently year in and year out putting up those sack numbers. So when the Falcons went out and paid him that big contract when he came to Atlanta, he was worth the money that we paid him to come to Atlanta and be one of the better pass rushers in the league. So I feel like the Falcons, we have to do better at going out and signing players that have proven it over their career and not being prisoners of the moment. A lot of the times, NFL fans, a lot of the times the media, we're all prisoners of the moment, and we look at the last thing that we just saw, and we kind of forget about what a player has done in the past, similar to a Deion Jones, which I recently brought up as well. He's one of those guys where we forgot how good Deion Jones has been for our Atlanta Falcons, because last year he didn't put up the interception numbers that he's put up in years past. He didn't have any pick sixes and things of that nature, which we're used to seeing him have. And because he didn't have those splash plays, we kind of say that a player is washed up, or fans in the media tells us that the player can't do it anymore, that he's not one of the better linebackers, and that he's fell off the cliff. And I disagree with that. Personally, I look at a player over their career, and that's pretty much how I judge them going forward, basically what type of player they are. And I feel like the media, they fall into the trap, and a lot of the the surface fans that don't watch the NFL in depth and they just watch on a surface level, or they're the NFL casual fan. If you're a casual fan, you're going to automatically just listen to what the media tells you and believe it. But I'm a firm believer in doing your own research. I'm a firm believer in going in and having your own opinion. And personally, that's one of my opinions about the Atlanta Falcons as far as pass rush. One of the main things that I think has bitten the Falcons, in the butt is we went out and we signed guys that had one good season. Dante Fowler Jr., prior to coming to Atlanta, he had 11 and a half sacks with the LA Rams. But a lot of the things that we didn't look at was who he was playing with at the time. Not saying that Dante Fowler is not a good player, because I do believe he's a solid pass rusher, and I'm still a fan of Dante Fowler. But I think when we look at these players, we have to be real and look at the system that they're playing in when they put up big numbers. And we also have to look at who their teammates are, like the Aaron Donalds of the world, like the Leonard Floyds of the world. And this is something else that Mike had brought up on Monday during the Cooler Talk. He talked about Von Miller getting a big contract with the Buffalo Bills this season. And he talked about last season, Von Miller being able to put up those sack numbers and have, that great game he had in the Super Bowl, because he was playing alongside arguably the best defensive player in the league in Aaron Donald, and also playing alongside Leonard Floyd and a multitude of pass rushers that the Rams have outside of, the Jalen Ramseys of the world. They have a lot of different guys over there that are playmakers. And when playmakers or when players play with guys that are playmakers, sometimes your stats are inflated. And I think that was kind of what happened with a guy like Dante Fowler. When you put him around other stars and you put him around players that can ball out, that's when you see Dante Fowler be able to take his game to the next level, because at that point, he's not experiencing double teams. He's able to take advantage of those one-on-one matchups like he was with the Rams, because he wasn't the focal point. And I think that that's something that really affected Dante Fowler when he was here in Atlanta, is we didn't have the pass rushers alongside of him. Because if you remember, prior to the Falcons signing Dante Fowler Jr., we had Takk McKinley on the other side, who was supposed to be, basically they were supposed to be like a tandem, and we end up releasing Takk McKinley. But with that being said, I do want to jump back in the chat and just say what's up, because a couple more people joined in. So shouts out to Prince Kale 89. He says, "Let's get it, Jew. Ready for that." What's going on, man? ATL Leo, what's going on? I appreciate you joining tonight as well. Melvin Emery, what's going on, man? I appreciate you joining. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe. As I mentioned earlier, when I start the show, I'm one subscriber away from 1,800. So I appreciate y'all getting your boy on my road to 2,000. I appreciate y'all allowing me to hit another milestone here on YouTube. And Wallace Smith, what's going on, man? But I kind of want to get you guys thoughts as well on this pass rush talk. What you guys think about Dante Fowler Jr., what you guys think about Vic Beasley, which out of those two players were the better player? Because I think that now when I look at the numbers, if you look at Vic Beasley's numbers, if you look at Dante Fowler Jr.'s numbers, Vic Beasley actually has better numbers than Dante Fowler, but he's out of the league. So that just kind of goes to show you, if you're the casual fan, you don't watch the NFL, game in and game out, and you don't go and look at the statistics, you don't go look at the stats, and you just listen to what the media tells you, you would believe that Vic Beasley was one of those guys that was a bust. And personally, I don't feel like Vic Beasley was a bust when he was here in Atlanta. I think he just wasn't used properly. And I think that he didn't have the guys around him to help him be successful, similar to Dante Fowler Jr. I do think Dante Fowler Jr. Underachieved as far as the contract that he had when he was here in Atlanta. But I think if we would have placed players around him, I think he could have played a lot better if we would have had, the Aaron Donalds, we would have had the Leonard Floyds, other guys around him that could kind of take some of the pressure off of him. But what's going on, Brian Peoples? What's happening, man? I appreciate you joining me tonight. What's going on, Miss Maggie? Y'all definitely go over to Atlanta Falcons Nation and to her channel. Hit that like and subscribe button. She's back doing content. Atlanta Falcons content, Atlanta Hawks. So you guys definitely go check her out. And I also believe Atlanta Braves. So all things Atlanta sports, y'all definitely check out Miss Maggie T. And Noah says Vic Beasley has one less sack in his career than Leonard Floyd, who was drafted a year after him. Exactly. So that just goes to show you that sometimes the narratives that are placed around players of being a bust or being a guy that wasn't one of those good players in the league. That's basically all the media talk. But if we look at just the numbers, as we say, numbers don't lie. If you just look at the numbers and let the numbers tell the story, it looks like Vic Beasley is one of those guys that actually still should be in the NFL or could have been a guy that should have been re-signed by the Falcons. But we went with what the narrative was, around Vic Beasley, that he was a player that wasn't a good player, that he was a guy that couldn't get 10 sacks in a season. And that's why I talk about all the time, getting double-digit sacks in a season is something that's really, really hard to do. Like, that's not something easy to do year in and year out. And Vic Beasley was one of those guys that was giving us 5 to 8 sacks a season. But we didn't think, at the time that was good enough. Let's see here. Joseph says, I agree with you, Jew. Yeah, I think, like I said, if you just step back and look at the numbers, if you just, take our emotions out of it, and that's something that we always talk about as well, is take your feelings out of it and actually step back and just look at the numbers. Sometimes the numbers will, tell you or show you, what the media won't actually tell you. And Miss Maggie T says all things ATL. So she does all Atlanta sports. Y'all definitely hit that like, subscribe button on her channel. Go check her out. And not just her channel, but also Mad Mike Sports, K Styles, 6-man K Styles. He's on this road to 1,000. I believe he's like less than 70 away from 1,000. So y'all definitely go over and hit that like and subscribe button on his channel as well. And Noah says, then again, Floyd never played without Khalil Mack or Aaron Donald beside him on the line. Exactly. Yeah, Leonard Floyd was actually drafted by the Chicago Bears. And he was playing alongside of, some of those great defensive players for the Chicago Bears, the Akeem Hicks of the world, the Khalil Macks of the world. Then in the linebacking core, Raekwon Smith. They have a lot of players over there in Chicago, and Chicago always has talent on the defensive line and talent on the defensive side of the ball. So it just goes to show you, don't believe everything you hear from the media, because the media sometimes doesn't keep it real. They push certain narratives, and you definitely have to go in and do your own research. Let's see here. Shouts out to my boy, 6-man K Styles. That's 1/3 of the heavy hitters. Y'all definitely go show him some love. I appreciate you in the chat. Eric Mack, what it do? Yeah, what's going on, man? I appreciate you joining me tonight. Wallace Smith said, I think if we would have re-signed Poe Beasley, we would have better numbers. And I completely agree. I feel like one of the biggest issues outside of not having the guys on the outside to help Dante Fowler and help Vic Beasley, I feel like the number one downfall for the Falcons, and this is something that we've been preaching on our shows, was letting go of Rashid Hageman. When Rashid Hageman was released by the Falcons, and then the next season we had Dontari Poe in 2017. That was the last season we made the playoffs, was 2017, when we lost to the Eagles in the divisional round. Ever since then, we haven't been back to the playoffs. So I definitely feel like once we got rid of that beef up front, we lost Jonathan Babineau after the Super Bowl season. We lost Rashid Hageman after 2017, and we lost or after 2016, and then we lost Dontari Poe after 2017, and we brought in guys like Tyler Davison, who never lived up to his salary that he got paid, and we brought in journeyman guys. We brought in the Charles Harrises of the world, and even looking at a guy like Charles Harris, when he was with our Falcons, I believe he signed a 1-year deal 2 seasons ago. He was here with us, and then he went on to the Detroit Lions and actually had a pretty good season rushing the passer. So it just goes to show you need the guys around you to be successful, but you definitely need that beef up front to help the pass rush. If you don't have any push up front in the middle, and that's what Arthur Smith was talking about early in the training camp sessions when they were doing mini camp. He was talking about which guys are going to be able to step up and bring that pressure to push the pocket. The Marlon Davisons of the world. Are they going to step up this year? The Taquan Grahams of the world. Are they going to be guys that's going to step up and help Grady push the pocket? Because we know we play against Tom Brady twice a year, who's a pure pocket passer. So you have to have those guys up front that can push the pocket. And that's the main reason why I wanted Jordan Davis, big Jordan Davis from Georgia, is because he's one of those guys that can consistently push the pocket, stop the run, and bring pressure up the middle. And I really think that's another reason why the Falcons have struggled with pass rush as well. And I talked about this prior to this NFL draft when we took Drake London. I feel like our Falcons don't value the defensive tackle position, and we don't value pass rushers the way that we should. I really feel like if the Falcons want to be successful in bringing in players to be able to rush the passer and stop the run, you have to be a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, which every year they're going in and they're drafting guys in the trenches. If you look at the defensive line for the Philadelphia Eagles, they have the Fletcher Cox of the world. They have Javon Hargraves. And then now they just went and got Jordan Davis. So it's a reason why they're always good at stopping the run. It's a reason why their defense is pretty much always solid. And that's because they're good in the trenches and they're good up front. Because the Eagles, for the last couple seasons, they haven't had good linebackers, but they have pass rush. They have the Brandon Grahams of the world, the Josh Sweats of the world, and all of those litany of guys, the Derek Barnett that they drafted. So every year they're going in and they're retooling their defensive line, retooling their offensive line. And I think that that's something that the Falcons are going to have to get back to, because I feel like when the Falcons were having success, we were going out and bringing in those guys that were nasty up front. We had the Harvey Dawes, we had the Todd McClures up front, we had the Tyson Claybos, and now we kind of have went, bargain bin shopping, bringing in, guys that we brought in off the street, basically, like the Wes Schweitzers of the world, and we brought in Chris, I think his name was Carpenter, we had on the team at one point, if I'm not mistaken, that we end up releasing. So we just had guys that not Terry Fontenot, but Thomas Dimitroff signed to try to just basically patch the offensive line up. And I think that we got to do better about going in the draft and building this offensive line back up, because that's going to be the key to our Atlanta Falcons team moving forward, both for the pass rush, for being able to stop the run. You're going to have to build this defensive line up. You're going to have to build the offensive line up, because where we've struggled the last, since 2017, where we've struggled is in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And that's been a reason why we haven't been a team that's been able to make the playoffs since 2017, is because we haven't been good in the trenches. We've been either below average or average. And lately it's been below average the last couple seasons. And Dre Murphy says we should have left Tyler Davidson with the Aints. Yeah, I said that when we signed Tyler Davidson. I said if the Saints are allowing him to walk, it's no way they're allowing him to walk with the walk away from their team and go to the Falcons. If he was a good player, the Saints would have re-signed him, because the Saints are notorious for re-signing their players. So when we picked him up from the Saints, I knew something was something was up. And Wallace Smith says, and that's why I was saying under Quinn that we was too small up front and we needed big bodies at the D tackle position. And that's something that I was talking about for a while on my channel. If you go back, I started doing YouTube almost 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years in August. And if you go back to like the beginning of my channel, I talked about that. I think it was in the 2018 or 19 season. I talked about it might have been the 2019 season. I talked about the Falcons being too small in the trenches, both on the offensive line and the defensive line, but definitely at that nose position. I've been talking about us needing to bring in somebody that can play the one tech, because Grady Jarrett is not a one tech. Grady Jarrett is a pass rusher and a 3 tech. And shouts out to my boy Mad Mike. He says, I'm here, Juju. More likes, people. Yeah, I appreciate that. Y'all definitely hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And there you go. I appreciate Noah in the chat saying you were thinking James Carpenter. Yeah, it's a problem when I can't remember somebody's name. Yeah, he was that bad when he was on the Falcons that I couldn't even remember this man's name. Yeah, James Carpenter. I think I called him Chris Carpenter. Yeah, James Carpenter. I think K Styles used to call him 300 pounds of pudding. Yeah, James Carpenter. Yeah, when he was here, he was a disgrace. Him and Jamon Brown, those two guys that were brought in to play the guard position were both turnstiles. No disrespect to those guys, but they didn't get it done. When we paid them that money to come in and kind of patch the offensive line up when Thomas Dimitroff was here, both of those guys were bad, really, really bad. Two of the worst guards in the league when they were with us. And Walt Smith says, but I think this new regime has got us headed in the right direction in getting big in the trenches. Most definitely. I definitely agree with this statement here. And I talked about a couple weeks ago on my last episode of What's the Word. I talked about the identity of this football team. And one thing that I can respect, and this is something that Mike talked about as well on Monday. One thing I can respect for Arthur Smith is he knows what type of players he likes. And Mike compared him to Bill Belichick, which I do see the similarities between him and Bill Belichick, because Bill Belichick goes after the same type of guys. He goes for the big, strong defensive linemen, the Christian Barmores of the world, the Vince Wilfork when he was with their team, all of those big guys. So they always have big guys up front that can stop the run. And they play that 3-4 defense that we kind of play here with Dean Pease. Even though we're a hybrid defense, they play that 3-4, and they always have big guys up front that can stop the run, that can get after the passer, and that'll you down for 4 quarters. And I think that that's something that Arthur Smith is trying to do here with our Falcons. Is he's trying to create that identity of being tough up front, being tough in the trenches, and being able to run the football. Because if you're able to run the football and you're able to stop the run, and that's something that is the blueprint for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New England Patriots and the Ravens, teams like that, the Philadelphia Eagles, those teams, their blueprint is running the ball, and their blueprint is stopping the run. And that's the reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin, he's never had a losing season since he's been in the NFL. It's because he understands the blueprint, and he understands the identity of being physical up front. He understands that the game of football is won in the trenches, and he understands what the game of football is about, which is moving another man against his will, as I mentioned earlier in the show. But with that being said, you guys go ahead. You can start dropping your questions in the chat, because I am going to open it up for fan Q&A. As you guys know, I'm normally on here for about an hour or so. So we're about 30 minutes into the show. So if you guys have questions, any question you may have, it don't have to be about, about the pass rush. It can be basically about anything Atlanta Falcons related or any NFL team related. But I'm definitely getting excited about this season. I'm definitely excited to see what the Atlanta Falcons are able to do this season when it comes to pass rush. I am going to wait and see and give these guys a chance, because last season, as we know, we didn't have a whole lot of money, and we didn't have a whole lot of money this season in free agency because of the bad contracts that were still on the books. But this is the second season under this regime. So I want to see if they're able to develop these players like the Ogundejis of the world. I want to see if they can bring in these guys like D'Angelo Malone that they brought in, Troy Anderson, a lot of these guys they brought in. I want to see if they're going to be able to develop these guys. And Brian People says, in your opinion, Drew, which players are on the hot seat? So I'll say the first player that's on the hot seat is Marlon Davidson. If you want to talk the defensive line, he's a guy that we took out of Auburn. You guys know that I'm an Auburn Tigers fan, War Eagle. I do think that Marlon Davidson is a guy. If he has all of the tools and the skill set to be a guy that can be a pass rusher. He did it in college, and he's shown us glimpses in the NFL that he's a guy that can get after the passer, that can make heads up plays, as he had that pick six against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers last season. But he had a couple plays last year, a couple splash plays. But I definitely think that Marlon Davidson is a guy that's on the hot seat. I think Quadri Olison from the running back position is on the hot seat because he's a former Thomas Dimitroff draft pick. So I feel like any of those guys that were from that first regime that were drafted and they're coming up like to be re-signed or let go because their rookie contracts are running up or drying up. I think that he's definitely a guy that can be possibly on the hot seat as well because he really hasn't gotten a lot of playing time and he hasn't proven himself to this new coaching staff. And then I think guys that are on 1 year deals, like the guys like Jalen Hawkins, even though I think he has a promising future, I think because he was also drafted in the last regime, he's going to have to prove that he deserves another contract. Another guy is Isaiah Oliver. As much as we love Isaiah Oliver, and Isaiah Oliver is one of Matt Mike's favorite corners on the team and one of his favorite players on the team, being that he's coming off an injury. And I think he only signed a 1 year prove it deal. He's another guy. I wouldn't necessarily say he's on the hot seat, but I'll say that he has some young guys behind him that's hungry and that's looking to take his spot, like the Darren Halls that this regime drafted last year. Guys like D. Alford that we brought in the offseason. All of these guys are going to be competing with Isaiah Oliver. So depending on how Isaiah Oliver bounces back from that injury that he had last season, it's going to be crucial to see if he's able to get another contract with the Atlanta Falcons next season and maybe get an extension where they sign him to like a 2 or 3 year deal after this year. Even though Dean Pease loves Isaiah Oliver, I think he could be one of those players as well that could be on a hot seat due to him having that injury and due to the money issue. As we talked about in Monday night show, it's only so much money that can go around. So you're going to have to prove your worth. Let's see here. Boomer the Falcon, what's going on, man? I appreciate you tuning in tonight as well. He says, do you think Drake London picks up the playbook? Most definitely. Yeah, I think Drake London will be the number 1 wide receiver for this team or the number 2 because technically they say Kyle Pitts is a tight end, but I believe Kyle Pitts is the number 1 wide receiver on our team. But yeah, I think Drake London is like 1B to Kyle Pitts 1A. But I definitely think that Drake London will pick up the offense. I don't think that Arthur Smith's offense, to be honest with you guys, is really complex. His offense is really basic. He doesn't run a lot of trick plays, and he doesn't run a lot of his playbook is kind of vanilla, to be completely honest, because everything is predicated off the run. And that's something that I think Mike was talking about as well. So if you look at the playbook last year, I do think that they can open up the playbook a little bit this year because now you got the mobile quarterback where they can do the quarterback keepers and you can do the zone read and you can do the RPOs a little bit better and you can add on to those type of plays because you have a quarterback that can keep the ball and run for a first down and and make big plays in the run game. But for the most part, if you go look at that Tennessee Titans offense when Arthur Smith was running that offense, it was very vanilla. It really wasn't a playbook that had a lot of trick plays or had a lot of depth to it. It was just they had a good offensive line. They were physical. Derrick Henry was the focal point, and then everybody pretty much fed off of Derrick Henry's his momentum and things of that nature, and they fed off of the rhythm of the running game. And let's see here. Noah says if our coverage lives up to our expectations, how many coverage sacks do you think we can get? This is a good comment. Definitely something that I think we definitely have to look at. And this is something that I was going to do a video on with us bringing in Casey Hayward. And this is something that Mike also talked about, and we talked about on Monday night during the Cooler Talk. We talked about Sauce Gardner and why the Falcons or a lot of Falcons fans wanted us to take Sauce Gardner so we can have 2 lockdown corners. But I think we already have two lockdown corners. So I do think that that's going to help as far as giving the pass rushers more time to get to the quarterback because guys are not going to be open right away. Because I think Casey Hayward and AJ Terrell are going to be guys that can match up man to man a little bit better than Fabian Monroe last year because last season teams didn't even look AJ Terrell's way. they focused in on number 22, which was Fabian Monroe. And a lot of the times he was getting either pass interference or they were completing the pass against him. But I think that that's going to be a little bit more difficult this season because now you have two legitimate Pro Bowl corners. Both Casey Hayward and AJ Terrell are both top 10 corners in the NFL and could easily be the best tandem in the league. As far as how many sacks we get based off of coverage sacks, I'm not too sure about that. But I definitely think that it's going to help our pass rush with having two lockdown corners because now Dean Pease won't be so reluctant to blitz. If you guys go back and listen to what Dean Pease talked about a lot during his press conferences through the week, he talked about he was kind of, especially after Isaiah Oliver got hurt, he was kind of scared to put guys out on the island by themselves because he didn't believe guys would hold up in man-to-man coverage. So he decided to play a lot of two high safeties so we wouldn't give up big plays. And he didn't want to leave those young guys, out to dry. So instead of, having guys, blitzing like crazy and making guys play man-to-man coverage, when he saw that guys weren't holding up in man-to-man coverage, like Richie Grant was forced to play slot corner. You had guys like Fabian Monroe, like I talked about, who was struggling in man-to-man coverage. Dean Pease was more, less likely to, turn up the heat and blitz like he likes to do. But I think that was the main reason why they targeted a guy like Casey Hayward, because this season I expect the Falcons to be able to blitz a lot more, which also will help those sack numbers because you'll have guys that can hold up in man-to-man coverage. But let's see here. And this is a great question right here by Wallace Smith. He says, do you think Algier could be our starting running back come week 1? And I definitely think that Tyler Algier is a very intriguing running back, very intriguing prospect. He wasn't a guy that was on my radar when I did my draft board, but he put up big numbers when he was at BYU. And he's a guy that I think is going to fit this Falcons scheme perfectly. We talked about Mike Davis being that stout physical runner. Well, Tyler Algier could be one of those guys that be the next Michael Turner, that physical downhill, low center of gravity. And he's a guy, when he hits the hole, he hits it hard. And he's one of those guys that's a north-south runner. He's not a guy that is going to try to avoid contact. He's a guy that's a one-cut runner, and he's going to, turn up north and south, and he's going to take on opposing tacklers. And he's a guy in the fourth quarter when you're starting to grind teams down, and they start to get tired and you're trying to run the clock out, the end games and finish teams off. I think that Tyler Algier is going to be one of those guys in short yardage situations. He's going to be able to get those first downs that we weren't able to get last year. And then I definitely think in red zone situations, because he's a big physical runner, I definitely think that he's going to be one of those guys that definitely could be the starting running back. Now, I do think he's going to have to earn that in the preseason. I do think he's going to have to prove that he deserves to be the starting running back for the Falcons. But I really think it's going to come down to him and Damian Williams. Damian Williams, and Cordell Patterson. But I think starting the year off, they're going to try to use Cordell Patterson as a Swiss Army knife. They're not going to try to use him strictly as a running back. But I think it'll come down to Damian Williams and Tyler Algier just showing up on the depth chart as the starting running back for the team. But I definitely think that Tyler Algier is a guy who's definitely an intriguing prospect and a guy that I like because of his physicality. Like, he fits the scheme perfect. And I think that he'll be an upgrade over a guy like Mike Davis, who disappointed us last season. And Tony Wright says, I believe that rookie outside linebacker Arnold Ebiketie will start opposite Lorenzo Carter, outside linebacker. Your thoughts? I could see that happening. One thing I like about Ebiketie is he's really good and sound in the running game as far as stopping the run and setting the edge. And I think that that's the most important thing when you're the starter for outside linebacker. You can bring guys in on third down and third and long and, passing situations where they can just rush the passer. I think the D'Angelo Malone's, I think he'll be better suited to be a guy that'd be like a pass rush specialist on certain downs. But I think Arnold Ebiketie or Ogundeji, I think could possibly be the starter. So I think starting the year, it's going to come down to Ebiketie or Ogundeji. I think that Lorenzo Carter definitely will be a starter. But on the opposite side of Lorenzo Carter, I think it's going to come down to Ebiketie or AO Ogundeji. Now, I wouldn't sleep on Ogundeji because to me, Ogundeji played well last season as well. When he got his opportunities, he was really solid in the run game. But I would like to see Ogundeji add some more pass rush moves. Because I think Ogundeji was really good last year for us in regards to setting the edge and things of that nature. And he was good at hustling and getting a lot of sacks based off of hustle. But to me, he didn't really have a lot of moves. He was really raw. He didn't have really any pass rush moves other than like bull rushing. He didn't have any, he wasn't using his hands too much. He was just basically bull rushing the whole time. So I would like to see him gain some more pass rush moves. And I think that Ebiketie may be a little bit more bendy and twitchy when it comes to far as pass rush moves. I think he may have a little bit better bend and he may be a little bit quicker off the ball than the Ogundeji. But I think both Ogundeji and Carter and Ebiketie, one thing that I like about all of those guys is they have length. And that's something that we kind of struggle with when we had the Vic Beasleys and we had the Dante Fowlers. They weren't that long. They were kind of on the shorter side and the lighter side. And I think the Falcons have done a good job of bringing in guys that have weight that's like 260 pounds and guys that are like 6'5", 6'6". Because Ogundeji, I believe, is 6'5". Ebiketie is like 6'3", 6'4". And then I know Lorenzo Carter is like 6'5". So we got really, really big outside linebackers, long, physical. And I think they'll be able to hold up a little bit better in the trenches as far as the run game goes. Let's see. And Tony Wright says, with our second round draft pick at number 45, we traded up to pick number 38 to draft Ebiketie as the Falcons management found out the Seattle at 40 was going to draft Ebiketie. Yeah, Ebiketie is one of those guys that definitely would fit in Seattle. I could definitely see the Seattle Seahawks wanting him on their team. He puts me in the mind of Chris Clemens that was with the Seattle Seahawks back in the day. So he's definitely one of those guys that is similar to guys that they like to draft. So I definitely could have seen them possibly wanting a guy like Ebiketie. And Wallace Smith pretty much said what I just said. He said, I think Carter and Ogundeji will be our starting outside linebackers and AK and Malone in rotation. And I think you might be right, Wallace, depending on how well the rookies play in preseason. Because just going by last season, it seems like Dean Pease likes veteran guys that understands the scheme. And that was the reason, and guys that understand their assignment. And that was kind of the reason why we seen Steven Means in the starting lineup, because he was one of those guys that just was going to, do his job, just stay in the hole. He wasn't going to jump outside his gap and things of that nature. And that's something that Dean Pease is a firm believer in. It's all 11 guys being on the string and all 11 guys doing their job and not trying to, play hero ball. So I definitely could see Ogundeji and Carter because they're the veterans, unless one of those rookies ball out in preseason and, end up taking that starting job. Let's see here. And Wallace Smith says, do you see us keeping Cordell Patterson at running back, wide receiver in the backfield, but not being used likely or like they did with him last year? I think they're going to use him the same way we've seen him used last year. I'm just going to keep it short and sweet, but I think he'll be used the same way. And if I'm the Falcons, I'm not changing what worked last year. So if I'm Arthur Smith as the play caller and Dave Ragone, I want CP to replicate the same numbers that he put up last year. I may not put as much on his plate, and I think that he's going to see less touches this year because you got guys like Drake London now. You added weapons, guys like Brian Edwards. You have other running backs that you went out and brought in, like Tyler Algier and Damian Williams. So I think the ball is going to be spread out a little bit more, and the carries are going to be spread around a little bit more. But if Cordell Patterson can have another Pro Bowl season, because he deserved to be a Pro Bowler last year, he was snubbed. I definitely think that they're going to use him in a similar fashion. And I think that's the reason why Cordell Patterson decided to kind of take the pay cut and stay with the Falcons, because he knew if he wants to be used, in the best way possible, Dave Ragone and Arthur Smith understand how to use his skill set. And I think that CP is best when he's used as a Swiss Army knife. I don't think he's like a wide receiver or a running back. I think he's an offensive weapon. So positionless football, versatility is the main thing that the Arthur Smith is looking for. Both him and Dave Ragone, they want guys that are versatile and that can do multiple things. And what's going on? Prove it. I don't think I said what's up to you tonight, man. I appreciate you joining me tonight. Let's see here. And he says Epic 6'2", but incredible length. Like you said, yeah, he has long arms. I know they talked about that in the draft. That was one of the reasons why the Falcons really liked him. Brian People says, what's your grade for this regime heading into training camp? So last year, I think I gave them a B when we did the ending, when we ended the season with our season ending grades for this regime last year, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember back now because that was months ago, but I believe I gave them like a B or a B minus. But I think last year they did a really good job at being able to win 7 games and basically being in the playoff hunt all the way up until like the last 2 weeks of the season was a really, really solid job for the first, for being the first season for Arthur Smith. So year 2 is going to be a huge litmus test for them to see, how well they do. Because if you guys remember back to the last regime, Dan Quinn went 8-8 his first season. And then the next season, I think it was 11-5. And that's when we went to the Super Bowl in 2016. So we were right around that same, 8-win mark. We went 10-7. I mean, I think we went 7-10 last year. So I could see this team definitely taking a jump. But going into training camp, I'll give them a B minus for last year. But as far as Terry Fontenot, I give him an A for the draft class that we brought in and the way that he maneuvered this whole cap situation. Like, I love the guys that he brought in. We built our wide receiver room when we started the offseason, and we started bringing in guys in free agency. When we lost Russell Gage, I thought that everything was about to go to hell in a handbasket or hell in hot water because we didn't really have nobody signed but Zacchaeus and Frank Darby. But they did a really good job of bringing in Drake London, trading for Brian Edwards, and not giving up too much to get him, which he's a player that got a lot of upside, bringing in Damiere Byrd. So I think they did a really good job of bringing in weapons. Fisker, I think, is another guy that went under the radar from the Titans, but he's a really, really good tight end, receiving tight end, and he's very similar to Hayden Hurst. Like, him and Hayden Hurst pretty much are the same player. So with us losing Hayden Hurst, you still have the ability to do those double tight end sets and triple tight end sets. Now that you brought in, you bring in Firsker. I think he's going to be a guy that's underrated, but can put up some big numbers because he's familiar with the scheme. So. And Noah says, question: our front office said we'll start to make more trenches moves during training camp, but what position would we need to target first? It depends on who's out there in free agency. Like right now, I think JPP is still out there. Adamakin Sue is still out there. So maybe if those guys are not signed, maybe you can, convince one of those guys that they really want to play. Maybe you can convince one of those guys to sign with the Falcons on a 1-year prove-it deal. Personally, out of those 2 guys, I would like to get JPP. But I would take either one of those guys, both Adamakin Sue and JPP. But I prefer JPP because we don't have any veterans really when it comes to the defensive end / outside linebacker. And I think that he could be a guy that could come in and help the Ogundajis, who's a similar body type to him. He can help the Lorenzo Carters because he's done it at the highest level, and he's also a Super Bowl champion. So if you can bring in a JPP with that Super Bowl experience, kind of like we did when we brought in the White Freeney in 2016. If we can bring in a veteran guy that can come help teach these young guys pass rush moves, teach these guys the trick to the trade of rushing the passer, I think that would be huge for our team. Improve It says CP don't need to carry the mail the whole season. Nah, I don't want CP to have to carry the mail the whole season. I think they did a good job also of building the running back room. Like you have Damian Williams, Quadri Olison, Avery Williams. You got a litany of guys. Of course, all of those guys probably are not going to dress every Sunday, but CP's not going to have to carry the weight that he carried last year. Because last year, pretty much CP had to do everything. He had to be our best wide receiver. He had to be our best running back. Outside of Kyle Pitts, CP was the only guy that was really productive. I mean, you had a couple games where Zacchaeus made a couple catches here and there, and you had a couple games where Russell Gage made some big time catches. But the most consistent guys that you had to really focus in on was CP and Cordell Patterson. But with the likes of the guys that we brought in, like the Drake Londons and the Brian Edwards of the world, you're not going to have to worry about CP, being burnt out the way he was last season. Excuse me. Andretti, what's going on, man? I appreciate you joining tonight as well. And if you guys haven't hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like and subscribe button. As I mentioned, we were one subscriber away from 1,800 and 200 away from 2,000. So I appreciate you guys continuing to help me continue to grow the channel, hit milestones, and definitely go over and show K-Styles, Mad Mike Sports. Y'all go and show them some love too on their channels as well. I believe K-Styles is about 70 away from 1K. So definitely let's get him to 1K before the season starts as well. And I believe Mike is on his road to 10K. So y'all definitely continue to support each and every one of our channels. We appreciate you guys for continuing to tune into the shows as always. And Wallace Smith says, who do you think will be the backup corners and safeties? So the backup corners, I think it'll be the starters we already know will be Casey Hayward and AJ Terrell. Behind them, it's you'll have Isaiah Oliver, that'll be the slot corner starter, and then behind them, you probably have D. Alford at that fourth corner spot, Darren Hall, possibly at that fifth spot. It'll be out of Darren Hall and Tease Tabor. Those two guys will probably battle it out for that fifth cornerback position. The safeties, you have Dean Marlowe, who probably will be a backup safety slash box safety slash linebacker, and you'll have Eric Harris from last season possibly being the backups, because I believe Richie Grant and Jalen Hawkins, I think this year they're going to take a step forward, and I think they'll be the guys that'll be the starters. So behind them will be the veterans, Dean Marlowe, and I think Harris returning from last season with that pectoral injury. I think those two guys will be their backups going into the season. But we have about 7 minutes left before 9 o'clock. So I'm going to hit a couple more of you guys' questions before we jump off here. And Tony Wright says drafting Troy Anderson and signing veteran free agent Nick Kwiatkowski, who is a monster. Check him out on YouTube. Indicates to me that the Falcons are going to try to trade Deion Jones. I don't know that necessarily. To me, if the Falcons trade Deion Jones, you'll be dumb to do that, because you haven't seen Troy Anderson play a snap yet in the NFL. You don't know how quick he's going to pick up the playbook and things of that nature. If I'm the Falcons, I'm keeping Deion Jones here for this season, even if it's just to be the starter and basically be that guy that helps these young guys along, like help these guys learn the NFL game, learn the playbook, learn the different keys. You need a guy like Deion Jones in the locker room. He is one of the leaders, believe it or not, for our Atlanta Falcons, even though Deion Jones is not a man of a lot of words, because he doesn't do a whole bunch of talking in the media. Deion Jones is one of those guys in the locker room that is the voice of the Atlanta Falcons. Both him and Grady Jarrett and AJ Terrell, those three guys are the three prong, the three pillars of our defense. Deion Jones, Grady Jarrett, and AJ Terrell. Those three guys are your three pillars. So I don't see a reason why you would let Deion Jones go. To me, the NFL is mainly, if you look at the linebacker position, the linebacker position, the guys have gotten a lot lighter at that position because it's a passing league. A lot of teams are throwing the ball. You play a lot of nickel defense and a lot of dime defense and quarters defense and a lot of different zones and things of that nature, like cover 3, cover 2. So if you're gonna play a lot of those, different variations of coverage and stuff like that, you need a linebacker like Deion Jones that's really good at covering guys. And even though I think Troy Anderson is a guy who can measure up athletically with a guy like Deion Jones, we haven't seen him on the NFL level to know if he's going to be able to translate from what he did in college to the NFL. We know what Deion Jones is. Deion Jones is one of the best linebackers in the game. And people are, continuously mentioning, how much Deion Jones makes. I really don't care about how much Deion Jones makes either as far as the money goes. You're going to pay top dollar for a good linebacker. Like everybody keeps, focusing in on how much money Deion Jones makes. He's one of the best linebackers in the game. So you're going to have to pay him. It's just like when you had the Ray Lewises of the world, any of those top linebackers you want to name in the league, all of the great linebackers, Bobby Wagner, those guys, you're going to have to pay them top dollar. And Deion Jones, to me, is no different. If we put Deion Jones on the market, he's going to be one of those guys that's going to be, every team is going to be calling the Falcons trying to get a Deion Jones on their team because he's not a guy that you can really replace, to be honest with you, as far as athleticism. If you're looking at the linebacker position and coverage linebackers, to me, Deion Jones is the best when it comes at that. So if I'm the Falcons, I'm not trading Deion Jones because of his contract. The only way I think the Falcons get rid of Deion Jones is if he has a bad season this year or he gets injured again. Like if he gets injured because he had a shoulder injury this past season. If that shoulder doesn't heal correctly or something like that, then I can see the Falcons moving off of him because you can't afford to pay a player that's injured all the time. But until I see it, until I see he's injury prone, I'm not moving off Deion Jones. And I'm gonna answer, let's see, maybe two more questions before we jump off here. Improve It just said it best. Find another coverage linebacker. Good luck. Exactly. Good luck with trying to replace one of the best. Like I'm a firm believer in you don't get rid of star players unless the player wants out and wants to be traded and there's a locker room cancer. You don't get rid of star players and guys that are your focal point. That's like trading Grady Jarrett. That doesn't make any sense. Like if you want to be a better defense and you want to compete for Super Bowls and things of that nature, you don't get rid of the Bobby Wagners, the Deion Joneses. You don't get rid of those guys because those guys are not easily replaced. Those guys are not easy to find. Let's see here. Wallace Smith says, do you think Olsen makes the roster? Only if he has a good preseason. If he doesn't have a good preseason, he's another guy that's on the hot seat. As I think Brian Peoples asked earlier, which player's on the hot seat? And I mentioned Quadra Olsen. He's a guy that is definitely on the hot seat because he wasn't drafted by Terry Fontenot in this regime. So anybody that wasn't drafted by this regime, you're on the hot seat. So if you're still on your rookie contract and you are from the last regime, you're on the hot seat. So I definitely think that Olsen, I don't know if he'll make the roster or not. I think it all depends on how he does in the preseason. Now, if you're asking me to just predict what I think, I'll say yes, he'll make it because he's one of those veteran guys. And even if he doesn't make the team, maybe they'll try to stash him on the practice squad. But he's going to have to ball out. And I think that he knows he's on the hot seat. So he's going to really play hard in preseason to try to show these guys that he's a special player. And let's see, I'm going to ask, I believe, one more question. We'll answer one more question for tonight, and then we're going to wrap it up here. Let's see. Maybe we'll do two more questions because I see two questions that I want to answer. So Ghost Pepper says, do you see Timmy Horn and Nate Landman making this squad? So I'm not too sure who Nate Landman is. So I definitely gotta check him out. But Timmy Horn, I did a video on Timmy Horn. So you guys definitely got to go check that out. I did that maybe a month or two ago, which was an Ask You question. But I think Timmy Horn is a guy that's going to make the squad because he's one of those guys that's huge, 6'5", 320 pounds. And I definitely think that we don't have enough one techs on our roster other than Anthony Rush. We really don't have any other guys on the roster that has that type of size. So Timmy Horn, I definitely think he's going to make the team, whether it's on a practice squad or whether he makes the 53-man active roster. But I definitely think he makes it. Nate Landman, I have to check him out because I'm not too sure what position he plays and who he is, to be honest with you. And let's see. We're going to answer one more question here. And Tony Wright says Dean Pease really likes Dean Marlowe from when he had him before. Don't be surprised if the team moves Marlowe to the backup free safety spot, releasing Eric Harris and keep undrafted free agent Brad Hawkins as the backup. I mean, everybody's on the hot seat at this point. Like as far as the defense, the secondary out of those veteran guys, I think all of those guys, the Dean Marlowe's, the Eric Harris's, definitely Brad Hawkins, those guys are definitely all on the hot seat because everybody's gonna have to earn a spot. And I think that Richie Grant and Jalen Hawkins are kind of coming into their own, and they're more athletic than these guys that are listed here. So I definitely think that those guys are like a shoe in to be the starters. They were grooming both Hawkins and they were grooming Richie Grant last season to be prepared for this season, to possibly be guys that could compete for starter roles. So I definitely think that those guys will be the starters. But Dean Marlowe and Eric Harris, I think those guys make the squad. The only way I don't think Eric Harris doesn't make the squad is for any reason that pectoral injury that he has doesn't heal properly or something like that, or if he gets injured again. But as long as he's prepared and ready to go by training camp, I think Eric Harris can beat out the Brad Hawkins, and I definitely think Dean Marlowe is going to beat out Brad Hawkins because he's played for Dean Pease, and like I mentioned, Dean Pease likes veteran guys. But with that being said, this been your boy Jew. I do appreciate you guys for joining me for another edition of What's the Word Dirty Bird. Like I said, we'll do this every other Wednesday night because every other Wednesday we're going to do heavy hitters as we ramp up for the NFL season. We're a couple weeks away from training camp, which I believe begins towards the end of July. But football is right around the corner. We're like 2 months away from the NFL season kicking off. And you guys know we're going to have a lot of content coming for you guys. We do the post-game shows, the heavy hitter shows every week where we give you guys our keys to victory. So you guys are definitely going to want to continue to tune in. Definitely tell somebody about the channel if you haven't already shared out my content, whether they're an NFL fan, Falcons fan. We talk about, all the NFL teams. Even though we cover the Falcons, we're very knowledgeable. Both me, Mike, K-Styles, the Unholy Alliance, everybody that's a part of this, podcast. We all are very knowledgeable about all the teams. So definitely continue to like, share, subscribe. But I appreciate you guys, and I hope you guys have a blessed evening. Enjoy the rest of your work week, and enjoy the rest of your, if you're on summer break, enjoy the rest of your week and your summer vacation. But with that being said, this been your boy Jew. I'll holler at you guys in the next video. As always, Falcons Nation, rise up. Peace.